Hi girls, this is Miss Gaska. Today I'm going to go over English 1 Semester 1 Week 2, Activity 2.3, Analyzing Writer's Style. Our learning targets for this activity are to make inferences about the effect a writer achieves by using specific sentence types and patterns, and to emulate a writer's style by writing a story opener in that style. So, writer's style. You learned in Unit 1 that a writer's style or voice is created by elements such as diction, syntax, and imagery, as well as point of view. So make sure you review these elements so that you understand and can define them. These are very, very, very important. They're going to be repeated all throughout all 4 English classes. They're going to be on your exams. You're going to need to be able to analyze them in order to do well in any kind of English or language arts class that you happen to have. So you need to know these words. Diction, it means word choice. That one should be easy for you because it sounds like dictionary. And from a dictionary, you could make many word choices. So use that to remind yourself what diction is. Syntax refers to sentence structure. Even though it's spelled differently, it sounds kind of similar. Sentence structure, syntax. Sen. And then imagery is when the author paints an image in your mind using lots of sensory details. Finally, point of view is the viewpoint, the way that the author sees things, okay? Or not the way the author sees things, but it's the angle from which the story is told. So, certain stories can grab the reader's attention and never let go until the story ends. Read the opening paragraph of The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry, which you will read in this unit. We're going to be circling images that stand out in the passage, as well as underlining sentence fragments and annotating the text to describe what effect the author creates with these fragments. Okay? So, $1.87. That was all. And 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony that such close dealing implied. 3 times Della counted it, $1.87, and the next day would be Christmas. So, let's go back and look for images that stand out in the passage. So I kind of think that even though they don't really describe what the dollar and the cents look like, I can kind of imagine what it would look like in the palm of my hand. So, we're supposed to circle, I guess. So I think $1.87 is an image. And then I can imagine the pennies as well. And then she also, by using the word bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher, I could kind of see her like being really pushy with them, like bulldozer. And then I'm also seeing like her cheeks burning, like meaning like she's blushing like furiously. And so those are the images that I think particularly stand out. Now I'm going to underline the sentence fragments. So keep in mind that a sentence fragment is another way of saying an incomplete sentence. It doesn't have both a subject and a predicate. So we're looking for which of these sentences don't have a subject and predicate. So $1.87. If I just came out and said that to you, you wouldn't know what I was talking about because I'm not saying anything about that. It doesn't have a predicate. So I'm going to underline that one. That was all. So there, we actually, believe it or not, we do have a subject and a predicate. We have that, which is a pronoun. We have was, which is our verb. So that tells us that we have enough for a complete sentence with the phrase, that was all. And 67 cents of it was in pennies. So here, it's kind of a gray area because using the word and implies there's half of a sentence that we're missing. I'm going to say it's a complete sentence just because it does have a subject and a predicate. And it's a style choice to begin it with the word and. So 60 cents of it is like what they're talking about. They're talking about the 60 cents. And then was is our verb, meaning it does have a subject, it does have a predicate. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer and vegetable man and butcher until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputation of parsimony that such dealing implied. Now, even though this sentence is kind of long, it is a fragment. Isn't that crazy? The reason it's a fragment is because it's referring to the pennies, but it doesn't tell us what the pennies do. It only tells us the modifiers explaining how she got the pennies, but the pennies are still the subject. the pennies that were saved 1 and 2 at a time by, so here we have, I'm gonna put a square around the modifiers just so you can see what I'm talking about. Saved 1 and 2 at a time describes the pennies. That's how she collected them. And then by bulldozing these people, that's also a modifier which modifies how they were saved 1 or 2 at a time. So none of that is actually the predicate. And then we have, finally, how she bulldozed them, or until what point she bulldozed them. So we don't actually have a complete sentence in any of this. We only have a subject and modifiers. It's actually getting kind of hard to see because of all the red. Sorry about that. 3 times Della counted it. So we have our subject, which is Della, and what is she doing? She's counting. So that one's a complete sentence. $1.87. Well, we already said that that's not a complete sentence. So I'm going to go ahead and underline that again. And the next day would be Christmas. So here, again, it's a style choice to begin the sentence with and. I'm not going to consider that a fragment, even though some people might. But the next day is our subject, and then would be is our verb. So we do have a complete sentence there. So we have 1, 2, 3 fragments in this collection of sentences. And out of the sentences, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sentences. So 3 of the 7 sentences are incomplete, which is almost half. So now we're supposed to examine the opening of the short story, The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe, which we're going to also be reading in this unit. So when we were reading this passage, we're going to be thinking about the effect of diction, syntax, and the point of view. What impression of the narrator does Poe create? So we're trying to consider the narrator's, how we would view the narrator. What impression is that narrator making? What do we think about the narrator by the end of this passage? So let's read this passage. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as I best could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitely settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. So, now I have a lot of ideas going on here. So the first part, he's saying that this man named Fortunato had injured him 1,000 times. That's probably a hyperbole. So, then it says, when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge, meaning he added insult to injury, as they say. Not only did he injure this man, but he also insulted him, so now he wants to get revenge. So we know that the narrator is vengeful. I'm going to underline, I vowed revenge. And then I had borne as best I could, so he had tried to tolerate the guy. And then he also uses the hyperbole, the 1,000 injuries, which is a diction choice. And then you, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. So he never threatened Fortunato. He didn't want to warn Fortunato about what was going to happen to him. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled. But the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of a risk. So, we know several things about this narrator based on how Poe is writing. He's using pretty lengthy sentences. He's using some compound sentences, as well as compound complex sentences. He's using sentences that have different modifiers. That's what's going on with the syntax. And the point of view is it's a first-person point of view. We're hearing from the narrator themselves about what they're going to do to this man, Fortunato. So what impressions of the narrator does Poe create? Let's think about that. He's creating this idea of a man who wants to get vengeance against another man, so he's vengeful. He also doesn't want to warn the man about it. He doesn't want to give the man an opportunity, so he's merciless. And then he doesn't want to risk anything, so we know that he's also cautious. He tolerated Fortunato, so he's always been kind of annoyed by Fortunato in general. But eventually, the annoyance gets to a breaking point where he's just like, you know what? Forget this. I'm not going to deal with this dude any longer. I'm going to solve this problem. So, notice how the syntax affects the pacing of the action. So which story seems to set a faster pace or seems to set the action of a story in motion more quickly? So when you look at that first selection, they're using a lot of fragments, which causes it to feel kind of urgent. So when the sentences are short, when they're fragmented, it causes a sense of urgency or anxiousness because the author is trying to communicate to us how that character is feeling. In that moment, that character is feeling anxious and distraught because she only has $1.87 and it's the day before Christmas. So we can imagine that she doesn't have enough money to get a Christmas present. In the second one, we're getting like these long and lengthy sentences, which kind of suggests to us that the narrator has been brewing over this slowly and deliberately. He's been planning this piece by piece by piece in detail, but it's not happening very quickly. It's happening at kind of a slow pace because of the way that the author is stretching out the sentences. So this is probably going to explain something similar to that. Poe uses long, compound, and complex sentences, while O. Henry uses sentence fragments for effect. A sentence fragment is a group of words that is grammatically incomplete and cannot stand alone. Writers change their sentence structure, their use of phrases, clauses, and different types of sentences to create certain effects. All right, so that's basically what we just examined with looking at those two pieces. So, emulating a writer's style. Every writer has a unique style. You will develop your own style as you develop your writing skills. One way to begin experimenting with style is to emulate another writer. So the word emulate means to try to copy that writer in a type of way, but not copy their words exactly, but to model your writing after theirs. So to emulate a writer is to imitate the writer's style, including how he or she constructs sentences. For example, here is a sample paragraph written as an emulation of the opening of The Cask of Amontillado. The deliberate rudeness of Lydia I had suffered silently, but when her actions bordered on bullying, I promised myself payback. You, who know my cautious, careful manner, do not think, however, that I indicated anything about my plans to Lydia. Eventually, I would get revenge, this I knew, but I would do so without any risk of blame. So that person basically rewrote that same introduction using different words, but the same exact style. Choose one of the following style elements: diction, syntax, imagery, or point of view. Only one of them. Briefly describe how an author can use that element to create unique style and voice. So you're explaining how the author uses one of those things in order to make their style and voice more unique. So for our narrative writing prompt, what you're going to do is choose one of the short story opening paragraphs that were used in this activity and emulate that writer's style in order to write an original story opening. So make sure that you're emulating the style of the author you chose, introduce a character, a setting, and/or a conflict in the opening, and then vary your sentence types to create effect, or to affect the pacing of the narrative. After you're done with that, then you will be done with this activity, and I will see you in activity 2.4. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.